but to begin to look at, well, what does that mean for the people living in those different places? So one way to do that is to simply look at race. And this is an indicator of a weighted average by different racial groups in the region of that level of the environmental hazards index where they're living. And the one on the left is the non-Hispanic white population, the second bar is African American, third is Latino or Hispanic, fourth is Asian, and the last one is mixed race or other. And it shows we have some environmental justice challenges in this region with populations of color exposed to environmental hazards much more than the non-Hispanic white population in the region. Youth vulnerability is an index that tries to pull together these indicators of risk in society. Low education, measured by high school dropouts, teen birth rates as a measure of early parenthood, broken families, measured by foster care placement rates, looking at the prison pipeline, trying to understand juvenile felony arrest rates, and then looking at median income levels as a measure of lack of opportunity. And this is a broader map that includes 3 counties that aren't in the SACOG region that was developed for a project that we worked in partnership with the Sierra Health Foundation and the California Endowment, and deeply appreciate their support for developing this project. But this is trying to understand the index of youth vulnerability throughout the region. And again, the red areas are places where there's particularly high levels of youth at risk. And again, you can do this comparison by race. And again, the same rates of non-Hispanic whites on the left, African American, Latinos, Asians, and others. And again, disproportionate populations of color at high risk in our youth population. So finally, social vulnerability, and this is more sort of work that's at the cutting edge of work that we've been doing, is trying to look at mapping broader issues of social vulnerability for the population as a whole, and updating this with some of the most recent census data. Looking at low education as the percent of adults who have less than a high school degree, a real indicator of vulnerability and risk in our high-tech, high-skilled economy. Low income rates, and then some measures of segregation, looking at the percent of linguistically isolated populations and the percent of non-white individuals in the regions. And we expect to expand this list of indicators of social vulnerability. But this gives you a preliminary indication of where those populations are as a whole that seem at risk. And again, a bit more mix of rural areas in the region where there's high at-risk populations, as well as some of our urban poor neighborhoods. And again, when you do a comparison by race, disparities are quite dramatic. And finally, I don't know if you can read that in the back, this is where we're really trying to put a lot of time in over the next month, 6 weeks, is to really flesh out this opportunity index. And this is trying to look at a set of things that we hope to plan for and build for in the region. And these are some of the initial ideas that we're pulling together. One is to really think about not just complete streets, which is something we've heard a bit about today, but really trying to think about complete neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods that have access to all the essential services for daily life. Access to healthy food, access to health services, child care services, social services, entertainment, etc. And our hope is to then to create an index that's very similar to what some people may know. This is the Walk Score. Walkscore.com is a really interesting website that shows a set of similar indices. And those green areas are places that have relatively dense, complete neighborhoods. And we'll sort of build on this with some of our own indicators in that area to develop maps for the region to understand where we have complete neighborhoods. But then also to link that to some of the data and indicators that we've been pulling together on access to jobs and income levels, and really not just think about sort of the spatial proximity, but thinking about the jobs housing match and whether the population living in a particular area has access to jobs that would fit their particular education levels and skill levels. Of course, looking at housing availability and affordability, some of the environmental amenities that we'd like to see in all of our neighborhoods, parks, open space, levels of tree canopy, etc. Looking at education levels, mobility and transport, and some indicators of health as well. I know that's a lot of content to throw you away, but I want to make sure we have some time for discussion and feedback. And so what are we really looking for today? The first is get involved. We'd love to hear your feedback discussion today. If you have thoughts and ideas to tell us, but particularly to get involved with the working group that will be delving into these issues in much more depth. If you're interested in getting involved, there will be a sign-up form on the website. Contact Monica in the back. Her email is there. She can coordinate that. But we're also looking for feedback now today, and we have about 15 minutes of time left. One is just to get your comments on sort of our overall approach of thinking about these environmental hazards, risk and vulnerability and opportunity. Does that seem to capture for you intuitively how you think about equity and opportunity in the region, or are there other ways we might frame it or think about talking about it or developing indicators around that? In your experience in working with numbers and data and broader populations, do you have suggestions and ideas of how we can best present this data, how we can best organize it? Do the maps make sense? Do graphs, are they useful? Are there other ways of showing this information that would be particularly valuable? And then finally, as you think about the massive data and indicators and numbers that have been presented today, and that's only a tiny portion of what's available, what is the value of what I've described as these sort of headline or dashboard indicators that try and combine a broad range of issues into some overall genuine progress indicator or national happiness index, versus, for instance, really trying to break these out into separate components and making that data more available for particular constituencies and talking about them in a more detailed way. So let me stop there and see if we have comments or questions or feedback, and I think we'll take questions on any of the presentations that have been given today, but particularly on these indicators. Can I just take hands, or should we do cards?
If you can respond to the question through the mic.
Okay. So there's a question here, sir. Yes.
Yeah, I would like to know how does the expenditures and the scenarios that were mentioned earlier compare to, on a geographic basis, to the needs that you just demonstrated, especially when it's broken down by ethnicity and race?
So the question was about the expenditures in scenario 1, 2, 3 and how they relate to some of the equity indicators that I presented here. And I'll let Casey say a few words about that as well. At the moment, many of the indicators that I've talked about here were not involved in the MTP planning. These are ones that we're doing specifically for this Sustainable Communities Plan from the HUD grant. Now, SACOG has looked at equity indicators as part of their MTP planning, but not these particular social indices. Casey, did you want to say anything more about that?
I don't want to say, but for the scenarios, we haven't gone to that level of detail. It's really going to be for the next step.
Yeah, so it's really, that's where we are now, is really incorporating these equity analysis into the planning scenario. So the goal is over the next 6 months to really pull that in. Other questions?